Yeah, I see your two hands, but I don't see you.
Okay,
Okay, that'll
ready?
work. Yeah.
And action.
Hey, I am getting ready for my big trip. Before I can leave the country, there's so much that needs to be done. There's knitting to be decided, there's phone numbers to put into my contact list, there's hours of museums to check, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Outside my window, you can see a little slice of Manhattan. Yes, I live in a big city that's bustling 24/7. You know, it has the reputation as the city that never sleeps. But there's another city that's also pretty vibrant, the City of Lights, known to most of you as Paris. I'm heading there in a little over a week. Before I leave for my trip, I wanted to talk to you about what I'm expecting to see and do on that trip, what I'll be taking with me, how I prepare for such a trip. But of course, it's a knitting program, so I do want to talk a little bit about knitting too. You'll remember in past episodes that I was finishing a sweater. I no longer have it, it's been gifted to the recipient. It wasn't a gift from me, it was a gift from her daughter, who is a friend of mine, who asked me to finish the sweater that her mother had started 10 years ago before she developed macular degeneration. It just so happens that the color of that sweater is the Pantone color of the year. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Pantone, and I wanted to show you some footage and a couple of images of Liana wearing her sweater that she began that I completed. So I'll insert a little bit of that here.
Are you remembering it?
How long ago was it, Helen?
I found the receipt for the wool after I brought it over to you, and she bought the wool in 2010.
So it's 12 years ago, maybe.
You made this part here. You started in the back. You did the back panel, and then you didn't finish it. And when we were cleaning out the house, I said, "Mom, you started this beautiful sweater," and you said, "Oh, I'm going to finish that." Well, Billy finished it for you.
Oh my gosh. Was this hanging on the bedroom door?
Maybe. But it looks beautiful on you.
Many of you will be familiar with Pantone as a color matching company, a company that assigns a specific numbering system to each color. The purpose of doing that is so that architects, interior designers, textile designers, paint manufacturers, all kinds of different companies that are involved with the use of color can have a system for identifying a specific color across an array of products. They started back in 1963, and each year the company chooses its color of the year. For 2023, they have chosen Viva Magenta, to which they've assigned the number 18-1750. Now, I don't know if Madeline Tosh Yarn Company uses the Pantone color numbering system to develop their colors, but it does seem like the sweater that I finished for my friend's mother is very close to this color. So the lady had foresight. This past year, 2022, the color was very Perry. And the reason I'm showing you this is I couldn't find a similar thing for next year's color, but for this past year's color, they gave suggestions of how to use that color in combination with other colors. So for people who are knitting Fair Isle or who are doing color work and are having trouble selecting colors that will harmonize with one another, this website could be a very interesting tool for you. Here's another set of 8. Sometimes choosing that many colors can be daunting, and they've taken some of the guesswork out of it for you, so it could be an interesting resource. You can probably see on screen pantone.com/color of the year 2022 palette exploration. I'll put the link in the show description. There's one last thing that I wanted to show you about Pantone, that for $217 US, you too can have a swatch book of 2,390 different colors, each one having a Pantone number assigned to it. Now that that sweater is put to rest, I have 2 projects of my own that I'm working on. I'm going to quickly show them to you, and I'll come back to talking about them when I talk about what I'm bringing on my trip to France. So this is one of the projects, the Ibiza scarf that I'm knitting on size 3 needles. These are the hexagonal shaped ergonomic needles that I purchased when I was at Rhinebeck. They are very helpful to knitting this particular piece. My ChiaoGoos were way too slick. Things were slipping and sliding. These are quite a bit grippier as they're wooden. So that's one. My other project is the Spencer. I'm doing it as a knit along. We've really just gotten underway. Information will be in the show notes if you'd like to join in. It's lace. I happen to be on a size 4 needle. We have a Zoom call coming up this weekend, so there is time for you to at least join us, see what we're up to, and it'll be very easy for you to catch up. None of us have knit very far yet, so please check the show notes. Information is there. Again, I'll come back to talking about these 2 vis-a-vis my trip. Knitting is just one of my passions. The other thing that I'm very passionate about is travel. The pattern I just showed you, the nightshirt, is a vintage pattern I picked up while I was in Scotland, while I was in the Shetland Islands earlier this year. If you happen to catch my episode where I talked about my top 10 gift selections for the holidays this year, you would have seen that my number 1 suggested gift was a trip to Scotland in 2023. My husband and I will be taking a small group of people. Perhaps you can join us. It will take place the week before Shetland Wool Week in case people want to go on to Lerwick. I'll make sure that you get to the overnight ferry in time. I have activities planned for each day from September 16th to September 23rd, which will include visits to a wide variety of museums, palaces, a Scotch tasting, all sorts of interesting things. We loved it there. Edinburgh and Glasgow have some amazing attractions. So check the show notes for information on that, and do let me know. I'm going to start really, getting the list of serious people so that I can start reserving hotel and so forth. Next up on my travel schedule is, in just a little over a week from now, a trip to France. In one of my earlier episodes, I interviewed Matthew Brown, who is a vintage button collector who shared some of his expertise on Art Deco buttons. This is a sweater that I will be looking for buttons for. It can carry quite a large button. I made a good sized buttonhole, probably a little over 1 inch in diameter, but I'd like to match these 2 colors, sort of an aqua color and teal. This is a sweater that's been languishing for quite a while. Maybe if I had the buttons, I'd be a little more excited about inserting the other sleeve, which is already knit, and making the belt. It's gonna need a buckle for the belt, so that's another thing that I have to look for. But I wanted to show this as an example of what I'll be shopping for, but I'm inviting you to communicate with me if there are specific button needs that you have. I'll be going through Matthew Brown's attic, sifting through thousands and thousands of buttons. So if there's something specific that you're looking for, or send me a picture of a project and ask me to match something up for you, I'm happy to do that. I will ship worldwide. You will have to pay for the shipping. But reach out to me. You can private message me on Instagram or Ravelry at billietoy. I'll put it on the screen so you'll have the spelling. I'm going to be leaving in about a week, remember, so try and get in touch with me quickly. In case you didn't have a project in mind that uses buttons, I'd like to propose several vintage projects that I have found on Ravelry. I'll put the links in the show notes. Here's a dress that has a matching hat and purse. This is a Peyton's and Baldwin's pattern called the Coat on the Cover that requires a bunch of buttons. And here's another offering called Vintage Lady Short Sleeve Cardigan. Here's one more cardigan that calls for buttons. So if you're interested in taking advantage of my offer to pick up some buttons for you, these might be patterns of interest if you didn't already have something in mind. Behind that sweater are other things that I'm planning to take on the trip. I have shown these sweaters in a prior episode, but what I didn't show that I wanted to share with you is how I'm styling each sweater. I'm only planning to take a carry-on bag. This trip is only 8 days, so I don't want to have a large piece of luggage that I have to carry around. My husband and I will each have our own small carry-on. In that carry-on, besides the sweaters, I have to bring gifts for some of the people who I'm going to see there and some other things. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight into what I go through in preparation for such a trip. Of course, the first thing on my list are our passports. This passport case has been with me since my very first overseas trip, 1972. Back then, they would stamp your passport with the places that you've been. This passport has some stamps, but now they're not even doing that anymore. When we went to Scotland, I asked them, could you please stamp my passport? We don't do it anymore. Everything is all digitized, which is a pity because I've seen passports of some of my ancestors. It's really fascinating to see where they went. Oh, well, no more. Anyway, this is essential when leaving the country. So that is top of my list. Next on my list is foreign currency. So fortunately for us, right around the corner is a bank that has in its lobby area, separate from the bank, a little foreign exchange counter. You can get any currency that you want. So I've already picked up some euros so that when we get there, I'll have some cash and not totally reliant on my credit card. The first place where we're staying, the woman wants to be paid in cash. So got my euros. These days, another essential thing to have are all of these power cords. Power cord to charge my phone, power cord to charge my HEPA, my portable HEPA filter. If you haven't seen that, I'll give a link to the episode where I showed what I used on the Scotland trip. Now, I have a set of these adapters, I haven't pulled out the one for France, but this one is specifically for Northern Europe, and it's marked right on here, Northern Europe. Each one says which countries it will work in. So that's going with me. Of course, my smartphone goes along on the trip. And as a preliminary for this trip, I have cleared off a lot of old photographs and a lot of old video to make space for images that I'm going to be sharing with you. I also have downloaded just a few maps onto my phone that will be interactive as I'm walking around. I'll be able to enlarge areas if I need to. But I've preloaded onto here like 6 or 8 stops that I want to make in the course of a day. And that'll be handy on my phone. I also have from not my first trip to France, but probably around the second or the third time I was there, maybe sometime in the 80s, I picked up one of these Paris par arrondissement, which has a little, these old thumb tabs. I don't know if you can see that. The little tabs are numbered. Each neighborhood of Paris has a number. There are 20 different arrondissements, as they're called. And you can see a map just for that neighborhood, which is great. The problem with this is it's hard to get an overview of where that is in relationship to other things. So that's why having my Google Maps is also good. There is a huge pull-out map in the back, but standing on the street in January weather, that would not be fun to do at all. This is an indispensable thing. I take it with me every time I go to France. And I have marked up places I've been. I have a little sticky note in here, or places that I want to see. Sometimes restaurants, I'll notate in here. So if I'm in a particular neighborhood, I might be able to see a few different restaurants. It has every single street in Paris, and there are many of them, many little streets, because sometimes the street only goes for 1 block. So that's coming. Then in the gift category, we're going to be staying for part of the time with a French cousin of mine who hasn't lived in France for decades. He'd been living in Vietnam and the Philippines. The last time we saw him, except for Zoom, was at his wedding, and since then he's had a son. So what do you get for someone French? The son is bilingual because his mother is from the Philippines and English is her first language. So I selected a copy of The Little Prince in English. He may have already seen it in French because that's the original language. But I thought this cute little illustrated book, it's similar to the French one that I used when I was in high school. Now, because my cousin is an architect and urban planner, I thought that this game about New York architecture specifically would be fun for their family, who by now I'm sure he's gotten his son interested in architecture as well. So it features some of the New York legendary landmarks, they're calling them, the Flatiron Building, the Chrysler Building, the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty, the Guggenheim Museum. So I hope they'll enjoy that. It's a matching game. It should be easy enough for their son. Now I have another cousin who's had a grandbaby since our last visit there. I had knit a sweater for that grandbaby, but early on in the pandemic, no packages were being allowed into France. So I had made a little sweater with the baby's initials on it. It was a boy. I had not gotten to the point of attaching the buttons. It's a good thing because now I'm going to give this to their second grandbaby, who's a little girl. I'm going to change out the initials and put some very feminine buttons on here, which I'll probably buy when I see Matthew Brown. Then, because it's another very New York thing, I picked up from the Metropolitan Museum this birthday book. So every day of every month has a place where you can enter various people's birth dates. And on each page, there's some work of art from the Metropolitan Museum's collection. So I tried to find some very New York things. These are going to fit into my carry-on luggage. Inside the board game, I'm going to be putting some smaller objects, and I'll bring wrapping paper along with me that I can wrap the gifts once I'm there, once I unpack the things that I'm going to stash inside the box. So I think that's a good insight into what I'll be taking. I know that I will be able to fit all of this inside. I might have to undo the wrapping paper so I can fold it. I'm not sure yet. Okay, the sweaters. One of my main reasons for taking this trip is that the original 1927 version of this sweater, designed by Elsa Schiaparelli, is in a museum exhibit that's closing in January. So I wanted to get there wearing mine, but I want you to see how I'm going to style this. This is the hat box that I keep in my closet. I'm going to try and put this in the other suitcase. And the empty space will be filled up with other things to prevent the hat from moving around. But this is the hat that I'll be wearing when I go to the museum in that sweater. It's a vintage hat. Don't think it's from the 1920s, but it works. This is my accessories pack. Let me unzip it to show you what's inside. Well, first off, I have a black and white scarf. It's not vintage, but it has vintage hats pictured on it. So I don't know that I'll be wearing it under my coat with this sweater, possibly. I also have this scarf, which is pink and black. It's a burnt velvet. But then I wanted you to see the jewelry. So inside of here, I have some knit hats, but I also have in these little pockets around the edges, all the different earrings and necklaces for each outfit. So these are the earrings. If you can see, they're pink, that I'll be wearing with this. And there's also, I also have a pink rhinestone bracelet that I'll accessorize that with, as well as this bow brooch. All of those same accessories can work with this sweater as well. Then I have my teal cardigan. And I have a little beret, matching beret, packed in here. and a group of green bangle bracelets. And a pair of initial Art Deco pins with my initials. Jade earrings. And I have two different green necklaces. I probably will style it with both of them because less isn't always more sometimes, but sometimes more is more. For this sweater, these are the pins I usually wear with this. So I tend to keep them on here. I'll have the same bracelets going on. I do have a handbag that matches this beautifully, but I don't think that I'll be able to take a handbag. When I'm out as a tourist, I like to have a roomier handbag. The handbag for this is more like fancy and small, but I like to be able to have my phone handy, my knitting handy, map handy, and room in my bag in case I purchase anything. Rather than having a bunch of shopping bags, I like to be able to have a bag that's accommodating. So I just have a large black tote bag. I almost forgot to mention that this little hat, which I knit, will be accompanying this sweater. So that is also part of styling this particular garment. And it'll be styled with black trousers, so the black bag is always going to work, and black shoes. I think I'm only taking one pair of shoes. I'm not planning to go to any fancy events, so I don't need like heels for anything. I'm just going to have my walking shoes. They're not knit, but I did want to show you under the cardigan. I have a couple of different blouse options. This one is vintage with glass buttons and some lace detail, pleating. And this one is not vintage, but it has a vintage vibe to it. So I'll get a couple of wears out of each sweater. I have a list of several different yarn shops that I plan to visit while there. I'm not sure what yarns are made in France. I know Annie Blatt used to be. I don't know if they're still around. But we'll see. They probably have Italian yarns and maybe English yarns. I'm not really on a mission to buy yarn, but I definitely want to check out the shops that are there, since the last time I was in France, I wasn't yet a knitting addict, so I wasn't seeking out the yarn shops. I know that Amy of La Bien-Aimée has closed her shop, which I was really sad to learn when I met her at Rhinebeck this year. But there are several other shops, and there's also vintage shops that I'm planning to pop in on. Last time I was there, I was looking at some of those. I'm sure you've been wondering what knitting I'm taking on the plane with me. So I mentioned to you these two different projects, and I did want to circle back to which of these two I'm planning to take. It's not this one. Here's why. I have handwritten the instructions for this shawl scarf. Mine is probably going to be more like a scarf than a shawl, because I found it was too difficult to refer to it on my phone. I would have to have my phone on all the time. There are 32 rows to this pattern, and within the row, the repeat is 15 stitches, but it's not like 15 knit, 15 purl. No, it's complicated, like purl through the back loop, purl, knit 5, purl, knit, purl through the back loop 3 times, and then purl. I can't commit any of these to memory. So even as I'm working across the row, a single row, I'm referring back to this again and again. That's too complicated. Sure, I could do it while I'm sitting on the plane, but when I'm sitting around in someone's living room or in a restaurant, it's too cumbersome. So my choice for knitting to go along with me on this trip is going to be the Spencer, because here it's really a 4-row repeat. 2 of the rows are kind of relaxation or respite rows. On the reverse side, the back side, it's easy. It's 5 pearls, 2 knits, 5 pearls, 2 knits. That's sort of like a breeze. I don't have to refer to anything. And it's the same on the 2nd and the 4th row. So it's only on the other 2 rows that there's this lace motif, and it's not that complicated because it's only a 5-stitch repeat in between these vertical columns. And at this point, I've memorized those 2 rows. They're not that hard. It took me a while, but I have it now, that I won't need to have anything with me on the plane, and I could be sitting and talking to somebody while I'm knitting those. So that was important to me. I want it to be relaxation knitting, not stressful, because I want to be able to be sociable. This will be my 17th visit to France. So most of the typical tourist attractions, I have already been there, done that. The places that we'll be going to this time are smaller museums, none of which I have visited before. It's possible that I would go back to some place like the Picasso Museum or the Rodin Museum, but probably not so likely. There's an architecture exhibit that involves the French influence on American Art Deco that I'm interested in seeing. I've never been to the Sèvres factory and museum, so that's probably on the list. And there are a few other places. Of course, I'll be going to MAD, the Museum of Decorative Arts, where the Schiaparelli exhibit is. And when we're out in the countryside, we'll be visiting a museum devoted to mother of pearl buttons and other objects. So it's going to be a short trip, but nevertheless a unique one. In preparation for that trip, I did a little warm-up round. I spent the day recently at the Metropolitan Museum of Art because there are a couple of exhibits that are going to be closing soon, and I didn't want to miss them, especially because one is going to close while I'm out of the country. So at the end of this episode, I'm going to show you some of the beautiful kimonos that are on display, and just a couple of things from the Tudor exhibit, and then another little snip of a New York shop that I popped into that's doing something a little interesting. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the footage, and the next time I see you will be either during the trip or after the trip. So remember, let me know if there are buttons that you're interested in. Keep in mind the trip to Scotland. Let me know if you're interested in that. Love to read your comments. I will respond to each and every one of them. So please give this episode a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. Comments are great. Subscribe if you're so inclined. If you subscribe, you really want to hit the notifications bell, otherwise you'll never know when I'm coming out with a new episode. So thanks for staying with me till the end. I'll see you very soon. À la prochaine.
take a piece of the silk and you tie a little tiny string around it. You pick up another piece and another string. And you can see it's very time consuming and very, very expensive to do.
What part is tie-dye?
Right here, do you see the red, the little white dots? That's tie-dye. Or the blue dots over there. There's a lot over here, the white dots. So you would tie it up and then you would dye that part in blue. And then when you take it out and let it dry, then you take the strings off and you have the white dye.